Today, I've got a great interview with a couple of men that I believe are going to have an incredible impact on your life and ministry. John Sanders is from a small town, big church, and Pastor Les Hughes is from the Pastors Leadership Network. And they're going to join me to explore the meaning of entrepreneurship and how it relates to today's pastor. Join us after the break. I want to welcome Les Hughes and John Sanders to our show. And welcome, guys.
Hey, Casey, thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah, Casey, our honor. We're glad to be here.
You know, it's an interesting subject that we're going to be talking about today because, especially for me, because I spent about 16 years in bivocational ministry. Bivocational work is really more accurate. And so I do know what it's like to do church planting and trying to get a church up and running, and then also working in a secular world. And I can tell you just from personal experience that it was exhausting. Your ministry, Entrepastors, is designed to really help to mitigate some of the expenses that are associated with ministry. A lot of times pastors are getting out of the ministry, and one of the top three reasons is money. They just can't afford to keep doing it. Even though they love to do ministry, they're being prevented many times because the funds just aren't there.
Yeah.
So if you could just spend a few moments, the two of you, just kind of share with us your journey. I know that's hard to do in a few minutes. Then kind of tell us what you're doing.
Well, I'll jump in and just say that we've both had kind of an Entrepastor journey, so to speak. But for me, the impetus for starting this ministry and really wanting to serve other pastors flows out of that place of, it's not just wanting to help cover expenses of ministry. I'm tired of pastors struggling so much in ministry just to keep afloat financially. And so our vision for pastors is not just that they would go trade their time for dollars, working somewhere else and, working a job in addition to all of the stuff that comes with pastoring, but it's really to help them show up in the marketplace as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, where they're getting paid for the results that they're delivering, which can be much more profitable than just punching a time clock somewhere. So I don't mind the term bivocational, but what we're really trying to help pastors do is thrive financially, not just get by having another W-2 job at Walmart or Dollar General or something like that. So
well, that's a real paradigm shift, because I can tell you that, quite frankly, that's a totally different idea than most people have. Because as I mentioned earlier, bivocational for me was I would wake up each morning and say, who am I today?
Yeah.
Rather, I think what I'm hearing from you is your approach is you're a pastor in the marketplace.
That's it.
You have gifts, so why shouldn't it be applied there? And by the way, you're going to reach more people potentially in the marketplace than you are behind four walls of a church building.
And what we're learning, Casey, is that it's not as rare as many people might think. It's just that because of the mindsets that we have, because of a lot of tradition, and our phrase that we like to use is, we just want to blow up the model of the starving pastor. If someone chooses that lifestyle and is comfortable there and that's their sweet spot, we're not trying to talk anybody out of anything. We're there for the guys that don't like that. And
yeah, I just have to break in there, because there is no sweet spot of any pastor that wants to be a starving pastor. And if they're saying that, they're just flat out lying.
Well, they wear it like a badge of honor. Sometimes in the Christian faith, we wear it like a badge of honor, as though somehow to be broke is to be synonymous with being holy.
Yeah.
And the point, and many boards believe that too.
Right.
But and the point is, Casey, there are some people that don't agree with our message, and we're not trying to talk anybody in or out of anything. There are enough people who want a different lifestyle. They want financial freedom. They want time freedom. They want flexibility. They want to be able to freely speak what God places on their heart and say, thus saith the Lord, without worrying about a meeting after church saying, you're not going to say that anymore. We run into that with testimonials as well. So for that group of people, that's why we're here. So we want to blow up that model of starving pastor. We want to be there for the guy that's going paycheck to paycheck, that feels like he's got to apologize when he goes and buys a car for his family, or can't take his kids on vacation, or there's no money for college. That's our group of guys right there.
Well, I can speak to this in the sense of having been in ministry now more than 40 years, and particularly in New England, known as the land of the frozen chosen by some. But there's a lot of pastors who are definitely struggling, and they feel ashamed oftentimes that they're not making enough money. And so rather than trying to find out solutions, they kind of just they get isolated, and they don't know who to talk to. And quite honestly, in most environments, it's hard to talk to other pastors without them disclosing your weaknesses. So it gets to be a really strange twist on the pastor's psychological life. And of course, that has to affect their family, their spouse, and everybody else.
Yeah. And that's really one of the solutions we're providing with Entrepastors is we're creating that community for pastors where they can be in a safe space and talk about the successes that they're having in their businesses. And again, like Les alluded to earlier, this is not that uncommon. We're finding a number of pastors out there that have been thriving, not only in pastoral ministry, but in some kind of entrepreneurial business realm as well. But they're flying under the radar, man, because those pastors, by and large, cannot go into their church on a Sunday or their board meeting or their staff meeting and say, man, I just want to celebrate. I had the best month of my life this month in business. Because again, it gets back to that mindset that is so prevalent in the church today that we're very comfortable with a pastor who's barely getting by financially. We're not nearly as comfortable with a pastor who's thriving financially. And I'm not talking about with the income from the church or the offerings of people. It's just, we don't have a space for that. So we've got a lot of these guys flying under the radar, and we're trying to create that space, that safe community where we can celebrate those wins and where we can say, hey, it's okay to want to do better than what you've been doing up to this point. And you're not a failure because you haven't achieved that. We can show you how. We can show you and walk beside you to launch a successful business and to thrive and to still keep doing the work that you feel called to in the realm of the church and pastoral ministry.
I have a friend of mine who's a Black American pastor who literally grew up on the streets. Mother was strung out on drugs, no dad, and a street gang guy, all that sort of thing. And God saved him. And today I'm going to guess probably, but his income is somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 a year. He has a business, a thriving business, and he does really well with it. But it's a kind of an interesting contrast because when I've been to other Black American churches or even Hispanic churches, to your point, it really is this sense of, if you don't give in the offering today, we're not going to make it next week. And it kind of creates, even in the congregation, a sense of we are failures as Christians. There's really this kind of life isn't something that's typically going to attract other men specifically. They're not going to be attracted to a church where essentially it looks like you guys ain't going to make it this week.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So good. I think that's one of the benefits, one of many benefits of having a pastor who's thriving in business. I think it validates their ministry in the eyes of others, that they're not just kind of this profile of a needy person with their hand out. They actually understand how wealth is created. And I think that's an attractive quality to, would-be churchgoers and especially men, if I can say that, where they maybe have a level of respect of like, he gets it. He understands the world I'm in out here in the marketplace because he's also in it himself. So yeah.
Well, we men particularly are very performance and achievement based. And so if we see a pastor who just isn't really connecting with what we are doing in the real world, it's sort of, they just see pastors more as somebody sitting in a study for the rest of their lives. It's really not really engaging. And oftentimes, unfortunately, churches and even pastors unknowingly, they validate people who are faithful attenders rather than validating people who are doing something in the marketplace.
That's right. We have a pastor in our community that just this past week, and he's disgustingly young as well, John. And so this past week, he celebrated with our group that he had just getting ready to close a deal on 10 houses. And it's really going to move the needle in his business and in his life and impact not only his future, but probably generations to come, and his family, certainly his own kids. And he was able to celebrate that. And oh, by the way, other people on that call are wanting to have side conversations with him now and say, bro, I'm wanting to do some real estate. Talk to me about that deal. How did you broker that? And it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that with no shame, no competition, no guilt, just to be able to celebrate those things together.
And also the potential for real discipleship on a Monday rather than just a Sunday. Tell us more about, exactly how your outreach works.
Yeah. Well, one thing real quick, Casey, you mentioned this earlier, that this is a common theme we hear is that from our pastors is that they're having far more opportunities for ministry outside of the four walls of the church in the marketplace than they ever had just sitting in their offices. So again, it's a huge benefit of having our pastors out in the marketplace. But as far as how our platform works, we have a podcast that we produce content with every single week. It's a free resource for anybody that wants to tune in and listen to other pastors that are doing well in that arena. And then beyond that, we also have a membership community where we're really helping pastors put together a roadmap for financial freedom. And by the way, we don't just have one business that we're offering, or we don't have any businesses really that we're offering. We're helping guide your story, whatever path that may look like. We have a few different pathways that we can point people down as far as these might be some good broad categories for you to start looking at based on your skill set and your passions and how you're wired. But then for those pastors that really want to go deep and kind of get on the fast track, we also have a mastermind that we meet with every single week on a call. And that's really the ones where we see people taking action and achieving results very quickly in this journey. So we have a couple different levels that we can work with our audience in.
Well, one of the things that I encountered, I was put into a situation not of my own choosing where, one day I was a pastor, the next day I wasn't.
Yep.
By the way, it wasn't because of money or adultery. Let's get that clear. And, I found myself pushed into the marketplace. And unfortunately, and I have to say this probably applies to a lot of pastors, we don't have any skill sets. We didn't go to school, nor did we focus on business. So all of a sudden you're in the business world. Now, in my case, I had to go from, a salary to no salary to, finding my way in the business world and a lot of debt between that. But, in my case, I chose sales, went into the insurance business and had a lot of bumps and bruises in that, eventually getting into, I became a registered investment advisor, did that kind of work. I did work in advertising, and then I became a jack of all trades, master of none. But I think a lot of pastors would probably be in that same situation where they say, listen, I don't really have any skill sets. I never prepared for business. So how do you address that?
Get them less.
Well, respectfully, we would say, first of all, that is not true. And I think that. So thanks for teeing that up for us. But you're talking about an individual, if they've served the local church at all, certainly for years or a couple of decades, like the group of people a lot of times you're talking about. A lot of times we're talking about somebody that's in their early 50s or so that maybe an ultimatum been given to, and so they've been punched in the gut. Certainly understand them feeling that way, but they for a long time have been in conflict management. They've been training leadership. They've managed the budget. They've probably been, they've been lead pastor. They've been CEO of an organization. They've done team building. We could keep going. They're a public speaker. They take public speaking for granted. And there are tons of people that would pay money for somebody to coach them to be able to get on a stage and communicate, and they just kind of do it. Many of them can write. They've been writing 1 or 2 or 3 sermons a week for several years. So we have Entrepastors Press. We are an imprint of Morgan James Publishing, and want to come alongside pastors that normally wouldn't be able to have a conversation with a literary agent or a publisher. We can at least help them have a conversation with someone that might be able to make that dream come true. So it's just not true that they don't have any skill set. They may not have a long resume of employment outside of a local church, but they've got a long list of skill sets.
But what is true, Casey, is to validate where you're coming from, is that is a very common perception that a lot of pastors have of themselves. They're like, I'm just a pastor. I've just been leading a church for the last 10, 12, 20 years. And so we get to help them see. We kind of come alongside them in a coaching conversation and say, you do have a skill set. You just need to learn to apply that skill set differently in the marketplace. And what you're going to find is the marketplace will reward much of the skill set that you've been honing in ministry. You just thought it was for pastoring, but it can be used in many different arenas.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys saying
mentoring.
that, because it took me years to come to that understanding. And I can just tell you, just to express a lot of what pastors feel, and I'm glad you're bringing this up, is that pastors are thoroughly intimidated by the business world because they've never been in it. And so they feel like, I'm selling myself out, or I'm not, I'm not doing what God wants me to do. All of those dynamics come into. There's so many self-doubt dynamics. And I'm glad that you articulated that, because there are a lot of skill sets that are there, and quite frankly, that you excel in, that people, I've had people come to me and say, I can't really function in getting a job. And I said, well, number one, you don't smoke. Number two, you show up on time. You're already ahead of 90% of the workforce.
There you go.
No doubt.
There you go.
No doubt. Yeah. Absolutely.
Or drink, excuse me, not just smoking. But I said, if you're just faithful, for crying out loud, you're way ahead.
Trustworthy, do what you say you're going to do, show up on time, have a good work ethic. All of those things are skills that people will pay for.
How can pastors connect with you, and what are some of the entry level areas that you can really be of assistance in?
Yeah, we would encourage them to go to Entrepastors.com is our website. And if you're really interested in getting started, but you're not sure, where you would start, or you really have no idea what direction I would even go, we have a free get started guide that we'd like to offer to anyone. If you're interested, just go to Entrepastors.com/start, and you can get that free downloadable get started guide. And then really, we would encourage people to check out the podcast. That's, again, just a very easy entry point to our world. You're going to be introduced to a lot of pastors in all kinds of different arenas all across the United States that are doing really well in the marketplace. And you can be inspired by their stories and challenged and, equipped through some of the content that we're creating there. So the podcast and the website would be the two big ones we would point people to.
Wonderful. Listen, guys, I really want to thank you for being a part of our show today. And this is just tremendous resources, which is really what I like to do with Minister's Toolbox, is provide resources for pastors out there. Very encouraging. I just want to say I appreciate your ministry and what you're doing.
Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, it's been our pleasure. Thanks so much, Casey.
Appreciate it, my friend. Thanks once again for joining me in this podcast. I hope that it's been inspiring and helpful to you. I'll have all the links in the show notes for you to connect with Entrepastors Ministry and Network. I also want to bring to your attention, I've been talking to you about doing book reviews or book recommendations on YouTube. We've got a couple of them accomplished. There'll be a link in the show notes for that as well. If you're interested, I do 2 or 3 minutes about a book that really has had an impact on my life and recommend it to you for various reasons. Check it out. Before we go, as you know, I end each podcast with a quote especially for you. This one is from Napoleon Hill, who said, "If you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way." Until next time. Hey, if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please take a moment and subscribe and perhaps offer an honest review. In this way, it helps to get the word out. I hope you'll join us next week. Take care.